what Canada can be for the US. Let's all think back to that time of Reagan and the optimism we all had about the inevitable triumph of our way of life. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, we were sure that market-based democracy was triumphant and it was going to take hold all around the world. Political elites devoted themselves to trade liberalization and deregulation, to lowering taxes for corporations, because the economy would grow faster and everyone would get richer. Jobs that went offshore weren't being replaced, and the wages that supported entire communities stagnated. Ici, particulièrement en ce moment où on fait face à une nouvelle génération de défis, la pandémie, l'inflation, les changements climatiques, l'anxiété économique et les régimes autoritaires qui veulent nous ramener à un monde où règne la loi du plus fort. See, if we don't step up, other forces will step in. As like-minded democracies, as major economies, we need to work together to meet this moment. We need to stand up for what we believe in and be honest with ourselves about where we're not doing enough. It was grounded in the recognition that a lot of the heavy lifting out there around the world on building stronger communities, on defending democracy, on standing up for rights, on creating prosperity, was being done by women. And that the best way to change the world was actually to support women specifically and directly. And there are lots of very big aid organizations that do a good job reaching out to all sorts of different structures, but we decided to actually take, in addition to the work we do through the traditional means, to specifically target grassroots women's organizations around the world.
He started out as one of his country's youngest ever prime ministers, but at the rate he's going, he will not end up that way. Let me just say one or two things about U.S.-Canadian ties. Our two countries are truly integrated, whether one is talking about homeland security across the world's longest border, or global security, or our economies. We have the largest trade relationship in the world, and of course, we are 2/3 of the membership of the USMCA. There are obvious differences on the policy side between the two governments, but I'm glad to report this morning that relations between our two countries have been steadily improving since 1812.
This is about standing up for the UN Charter, for the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that have led to close to 80 years of peace and stability, not just in Europe, but everywhere around the world. The idea that might could somehow make right once again. Everywhere around the world, people are looking at Russia's decision to invade Ukraine and saying, hey, if that works out, then maybe it can work out for me. It's the wrong direction for our world, and they can't redraw the lines on a map or resettle what the international rules-based order is. That's why Ukraine matters. That's why Ukraine matters in Africa, in Asia, in South America, and everywhere around the world. It's not just, oh, war has come back to Europe and we all have to be worried about that. It's the underpinning of our system that is being directly challenged by an authoritarian state that must not succeed. Political parties who know people are anxious and angry and say, wow, I can just reflect that back at them and they'll feel heard and they'll support me. Because amplifying anger is a very effective short-term mobilization policy strategy for politics, or tactic even for politics. The tougher challenge is to figure out how to roll up your sleeves and solve it. They say, well, how do we address that? And that's the choice that your current president, President Biden, is trying to focus on. And it's a really, really tough thing to propose the earnest hard work of fixing something in incremental, complicated, difficult steps as opposed to, hey, let's just snap our fingers and light a fire. But of all the things that erode democracy, the failings of the promise of progress has got to be the most pernicious. That people no longer believe that the next generation will do even better than this one. War has returned to Europe and authoritarianism is on the rise. Antagonistic states around the world are using our economic interdependence for their own geopolitical advantage. And all around us, we see more and more polarization.
The idea that democracies need to deliver in order for people to maintain their faith in democracy is a powerful message. And thank you for making it. I wanted to start with a different part of your speech, if I may. This will probably drive your staff crazy, I apologize. But you said the world's a tough place, and we're the Council on Foreign Relations, so I wanted to pick up on that. And it is a tough place, and you mentioned a lot of the things in the beginning to your speech. You've got, in many ways, a deteriorating security environment. We see the aggression in Europe, something 30 years ago when Europe was proclaimed to be whole and free, we were not expecting. You mentioned Ronald Reagan. We see the growth of Chinese power, much greater assertiveness.
But we're going to have to continue to challenge and compete with China on an economic level, and we are going to be contesting China on the issues of human rights, whether it's in Xinjiang or Hong Kong or elsewhere, and abuses and challenges around the world, we're going to continue to step up. So ignoring China is not an option for anyone, but being strategic and thoughtful and firm and clear on how we engage with it is the path forward for all of us. We've continued to do like the US and many allies, continue to engage with a military presence in the Pacific, demonstrating that we're there to uphold the status quo. We recognize the one China policy, but we also recognize that there are no changes to the status quo. And we're going to continue to engage with China in a way that is aligned with our values and the principles that underpin our democracies. And that means obviously recognizing that China has chosen to be an increasingly disruptive global power, that there are things that we're going to need to work with China on. You can't be Canadian without being aware of the US because the scale is so much bigger, right? I mean, that's just, so as soon as you're aware of one other country, easy to be aware of all other countries. Americans do just fine being very aware of America, and you have the size that backs it up. So there's always going to be that slight misalignment, but we make it work for us, and
you should go into politics. That's good. That's good. One of the 142 countries that didn't stand up at the UN and say no is looking across a body of water, and that's China looking at Taiwan. What is Canada's position in terms of your willingness to signal China you ought not to act coercively? We understand, we acknowledge your claims, but we're not prepared to tolerate aggression against Taiwan. What are you prepared to do to deter, or if need be, defend against Chinese action there? Well, let's talk about the biggest immediate security challenge, which is Ukraine, what Russia's doing there. Many of the countries, including the United States, has essentially said their position is to support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
As long as it takes, with as much as it takes. Yeah, that's what we say.
And is that your position?
Yes, absolutely.